Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of college basketball. And we got another conference breakdown running through the Power Six. Up next is the Southeastern Conference, the SEC. Tim, are you ready to go?
Time's running out for Selection Sunday, so I'm ready. Let's run it.
Yeah, we're running out of time to break down these conferences, but let's not dilly-dally too long and get into these teams, starting with the Tennessee Volunteers. They have emerged as the clear class of the SEC, passing several tests both early and late in the season with flying colors. Especially entering the SEC tournament, wrapping up the season with 4 straight ranked games, 2 on the road and 2 at home. They went 3-1 in those games. So strong performances and strength of schedule has them bordering on 1 seed territory. They've recently dropped down to a 2, considering they just lost and they got smacked by Mississippi State. However, that doesn't understate how good this team is. Dalton Knecht is the clear star for this team, but Jonas Aidoo and the return of Zakai Ziegler gives the Volunteers an extra dimension that makes them super dangerous.
100%. This Tennessee team, I think that one of their biggest downfalls last year was the loss of Zakai Ziegler. He is incredible defensive player. He was the star of that defense. And that's the reason why they're such a good defense this year. Obviously, the rest of the team, has a big part to do with that, but he is an absolute monster on-ball defense. Dalton Knecht as a transfer has been absolutely insane. People are talking with him or talking about him on like player of the year levels. Now, some of it's just kind of copium because people hate Zach Edey. But he has been playing incredible this year,
Oh my
averaging
God.
21.4 points per game. Hey, I mean, it's true. That's just how it's been going. But
I mean, that's
he's been a
fair,
big
but you
reason.
did you really have to like throw that Edey jab in there?
Yes, because that's all I've been hearing about is people whining about Connect Player of the Year when it's just not accurate. But
Okay,
they
we
are
get
an
it. It's
incredible
clearly
team.
Edey.
Their
However, he's
offense.
really good.
But overall, this team, despite some of their struggles, they've now lost 2 straight. They're still a really good team. They can still do incredible damage on teams. And Connect has been a big part of that. He's elevated their offensive game while still them being an elite defensive team. So even though they've lost some games, you cannot underestimate this Tennessee Volunteers team.
Next up, we have Auburn, who metrically can compete with anyone in the country, being the highest ranked SEC team per KenPom. They're 11th in adjusted offensive efficiency and 6th in adjusted defensive efficiency. While being led by Johnny Broome, the Tigers are incredibly well-rounded and deep as 10 guys play 13 minutes or more per game. Allowing those guys to stay fresh and not rack up too many minutes over the course of a game can pay off, and it's led to Auburn being a team that shouldn't be overlooked.
Not at all. They are very balanced, and in terms of the metrics you talked about, they are right up there on both offensive and defensive efficiency. It's incredibly impressive, and their scoring, they are very balanced in their scoring. They score in a lot of different ways. They're unlike Tennessee. You don't have a 20-point per game scorer as your top. And they score kind of all over the floor. They shoot the ball pretty well. They defend very well. So they're a team that they can beat you in a number of different ways, which I think is really what makes them so dangerous. They've dropped a couple of games, like they have 7 losses, but to have 7 losses and still be considered that high in essentially metrics is, I think, kind of the most impressive thing to me. And they are playing really good basketball right now. We just talked about it just earlier today. They absolutely smacked South Carolina, so they are very much alive and well in this SEC tournament. So they are playing really, really good basketball right now. So see if they can keep the ball rolling.
Those well-rounded teams that are deep and can beat you in so many different ways, there's a level of unpredictability to it, and that's what makes them so intriguing. Unlike this next team, Alabama, they're pretty cut and dry. If you like fast teams and lots of offense, look no further because and this is the most extreme example that we've seen in the SEC. There are some teams that can shoot the lights out and they score fast and they score often, but Alabama is like the kingpin of that. They rank inside the top 10 in both offense and tempo in KenPom, and they average almost 91 points per game, and they frequently top triple digits. That doesn't mean that they're totally unbeatable, though, because their opponent is going to have a chance to score just as much as they are. And as strong as Alabama is offensively, their defense is sorely lacking. And another good, fast offensive team or a team that's able to slow Alabama's offense down can easily overcome them.
Yeah, you've seen this on a number of occasions. You know, they've had 10 losses, 5 of them coming in conference. And actually, if you're paying attention currently, as we are recording this video, they're getting smacked by Florida in the SEC tournament right now by about
Well,
20 with
yeah.
6 minutes to go.
We'll have the update for
So
you after, the game ends. You'll know whether they won or lost, but it's not trending good for the Tide right now. I mean, it doesn't matter.
not at
Really,
all.
really doesn't matter because they're going to make the tournament regardless. They're
No,
probably going to be like a 4 seed.
not at all.
However,
And they are absolutely a dangerous 4 seed at that. With how high powered and high tempo their offense is, if they are on, good luck stopping them. But that defense is incredibly, incredibly susceptible. We've seen another team like this in the SEC, actually, who we're going to be talking about next,
yeah.
who has this kind of offensive efficiency and offensive, just craziness, but their defense is super exploitable. And we've seen both of those teams struggle throughout the year. So as crazy as Alabama is on offense, when you sacrifice defense in your roster construction to make a team like this, you start playing with fire. And the Crimson Tide have dealt with that this year.
And sometimes you'll get burnt. That other team that you were talking about is Kentucky. Kentucky is built very similarly to Alabama. And I think by their standards, they're having a down year, but they're also fast. They're also offensively oriented. They score 90 points per game, just a hair under that. But defense is better than Alabama's, not a high bar to overcome. On offense, they're fundamentally sound. They're the best shooting team in the SEC in both field goal and three-point percentage. They have an awesome rotation of guard play, such as guys like Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepherd, and my boy Antonio Reeves, who, if you remembered, we talked about a few years ago at Illinois State. He was the lone bright spot, transferred to Kentucky, stepped right in. So super happy to see him getting his second leading score in the SEC with 20 points per game. And they play their bench guards too, because they have 6 guards that log 22 or more minutes per game. So you kind of see that this is similar to like last year's Miami team, minus the star big and the defense. When their offense is rolling and kicked into high gear, they can shock just about any team in the country. But when you factor that defense and you talk about them getting burned, both them and the Tide are right on upset watch for me. Do not be surprised if they're out early in the NCAA tournament.
That is the problem. When you have teams like this where their defense lacks, you're absolutely right. They can get shocked on any single night. Kentucky gets shocked tonight as well in the SEC tournament. So they've got some things to figure out if they want to make an actual deep run. You cannot make a run in the NCAA tournament without some amount of defense. And the problem is Kentucky has been flying by the seat of their pants. Again, top 10 in offensive efficiency and in tempo this whole year. And it's caused for some crazy games. They're a super fun team to watch. You talk about
no
guys
doubt.
like Reed Shepherd, Rob Dillingham. Oh my gosh, they're so much fun to watch. They can light it up on the offensive end. But there are teams that are, really good on offense as well that will come right back at them. And we talked about getting burned when you get in too many of these offensive shootouts. It's something that a lot of teams have seen throughout the year if they have this kind of style of play. So we'll see what happens with them. They are about as unpredictable as it gets, along with Alabama. So they've got some things to figure out if they want to actually make a deep run in this NCAA tournament.
Completely agree. We don't have many definitive takes on these teams like this will happen on this podcast, but I'm willing to make one right now in a little midi pseudo boom bust or believable. Both Alabama and Kentucky bust. Neither one of them are making it out of the first weekend. Book it.
Here's the thing, that's entirely possible, and that's not that crazy. With the way it all kind of depends on matchups.
Yeah, but I just booked it. So like,
here's the thing. I'm actually willing to be right there with you on that book it. Because usually we don't necessarily agree on a lot of these hot takes, but given what I've seen with both of these teams, they're very risky and they are high risk, high reward, and sometimes those high rewards or high risk come with high consequences.
I don't like it. I'm not a fan. That is not a gamble that I will be willing to take this March. I've seen it in person one too many times, and It's nice that we're actually agreeing on a book it for once. That's rather new
It's
territory in the
that's pretty rare.
when we see eye to eye on stuff. Brock Purdy looking at you, but whatever, trash quarterback. But we're talking college basketball here. And we got more teams to cover, next of which being the South Carolina Gamecocks. Nobody expected anything out of them to start the season. They started 21-3 and they put the country on notice. But their strength of schedule is one of the worst in all of Power Six, but they've done about as well as you can with what you got. If you remember how we talked about Pitt, they didn't do very well with their weak strength of schedule anyway, but South Carolina, they have answered the bell. Like, they went into Knoxville and beat Tennessee. They defended their home floor in a pretty convincing win against Kentucky. They have some quality wins snuck in there. The metrics don't exactly favor them either when you look at them compared to like these other teams, which kind of explains why they're a 5 seed right now. But winning on the court speaks for itself.
It does. And like you said, their strength of schedule is not very high. And when you've seen them play some of these tougher games in the second half of the season, that's where we've seen them drop some games. But you talk about the win at Tennessee. They've also had some quality wins as well. So you see them, have an off day here in the SEC tournament, get absolutely smacked here by Auburn. But that by no means tells me that they're like, falling apart. They are known to have, really on games and really off games. It just so happened that Auburn's, great game came with South Carolina's off game. But they are a very balanced team. And that usually leads me to some amount of, trust in some decent consistency for them. So I am not necessarily off the South Carolina train, but I do get nervous with some of these teams that have these really high records with sort of the low strength of schedule, hence, or exhibit A, some of these Houston teams in the past. Obviously different team makeup entirely, but that's why you start to get nervous with some of those teams in terms of necessarily being tested. But them being in the SEC means that they have faced their tests and they have passed some, and some of them they've fallen short. So they're a team, I guess you could call them unpredictable as well. But I think they kind of have more of the high ceiling, low floor, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, and it's not like a high ceiling, low floor in the way of like an Alabama or a Kentucky. I see the
No.
vision. I do get nervous. I don't think that it'll translate necessarily super well. I'm not ready to crown them to go on a deep run either. However,
I would not put them on like deep run watch, but they are capable of doing it. I
sure.
know they can. I just won't put it as very likely.
Yeah, that was a very good Auburn team that they lost to. Let's not forget. So, I'm just kind of stuck in the middle, with this team. Up next, we have
Yeah.
the Florida Gators, who have put up a pretty impressive season, going 11-7 in the SEC, and they've racked up some quality wins along the way. They score the ball pretty well. They crash the boards hard. They got a pretty big team that knows how to rebound. They're aggressive on the glass and they preach it, especially with second chance buckets, because they are fantastic on the offensive boards, and too many second chance points and opportunities can catch up to a defense over the course of the game, and that makes Florida super duper dangerous. But they turn the ball over because they're so fast paced. That can lead to some chaos and unorganized play. But, they have the opportunity to light up the scoreboard. Just like, will it happen on any given day? I'm not sure.
Yeah, looking at Florida with a little bit, of a bigger lens, they are a team, they score the ball very well, but not necessarily because they shoot the ball lights out. You talk about their offensive rebounding, they 15 offensive rebounds per game. That's a very high consistent number when it comes to crashing the glass, and they lead the NCAA entirely in rebounds per game with 43.3. So that just it's really solid, and it's a really big part of the game that a lot of teams don't necessarily hit. When you're able to rebound the ball super well defensively, and if you're able to create those second chance buckets, because they're not, like I said, they're not a super great shooting team. But when you just give yourself more and more opportunities, it's going to work out pretty well for you. Like you mentioned with those turnovers, when you move that fast, you're susceptible to, kind of running yourselves into the ground. But overall, they're a team, as they point out today, playing with Alabama and playing really well, that they can compete with any team in this SEC. And if they're able to, really lock things down and get in a rhythm in the NCAA tournament, they are absolutely a team that can make a run, specifically because of the fundamentals that they do well. So despite them having 10 losses and 7 of them in the SEC, I do like what I see in terms of the things that Florida does well.
Next up on the list of SEC teams is Mississippi State. They are an incredibly streaky team. They've overcome stretches of bad play, but they are playing well at the right time. They emerged back into the bubble, and they have officially punched their ticket. I think it's pretty certain. They lost 4 in a row entering the SEC tournament, and it almost cost them a bid. But the big wins against LSU and especially curb stomping Tennessee have all but clinched their spot. They'll kill you with tough, aggressive defense, and when they're causing havoc defensively, it's rough sledding for opposing teams. And you saw that if you watched the game against Tennessee. They were giving them fits, so don't sleep on the Bulldogs.
100%. I mean, they out defensed Tennessee, which Tennessee's thing is defense. And they were able to put up, when you have a team like this that is able to find ways to put up solid points, and obviously they're mostly running through Josh Hubbard and Tolu Smith. But when you find ways to get essentially team offense rolling against a defense that is really, really good like Tennessee, that's going to be the recipe for Mississippi State finding success. They're, like you said, they're playing well at the right time. And if they're able to continue to put together these more balanced games, that's going to be the key for them. I think defense is pretty much always going to be there. When you know how to play defense, you rarely sort of forget that or put up like a massive stinker. I think the big thing for them is going to be, can they keep their offense going on the level that it is right now, which is essentially enough to outpace other teams that have solid offenses like Tennessee. So they certainly have solidified themselves right now in the NCAA tournament. Sort of the matter is can they keep this momentum going, either finding their way to a championship here in the tournament, or if they can essentially just keep their momentum going regardless of a result here as they head into the NCAA tournament, wherever their seeding may fall.
I'm going to be honest, I don't think there's much more work that they can do. I mean, they've moved up to
They certainly don't necessarily need to.
Yeah, they've
done
up
their work
to the 9-10 line, and especially with numbers 1 and 2 being knocked out in the SEC tournament, there's really not that much room to go up. So I think they're pretty solidly cemented in. It's a lot different when you're playing with the season on the line with everything to lose, which we saw in this next team with Texas A&M. They're clinging onto a tournament spot as one of the last 4 in. So these games were everything for them. They're pretty well balanced, right around the top 40 in both offense and defense, but they've shown just how dangerous they can be, especially when they played lights out against Kentucky and stunned them. They beat them pretty decisively from start to finish. They led the whole way, didn't let up, and Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford starred in this game. They needed to be the stars, and they played like the stars. They're definitely capable of lighting it up from 3 and the field, although they don't necessarily do it all the time. But there's something else to be said about fighting for a final spot and realizing that one big slip up could be the difference between you getting in
now or never
and being left out. So it really is now or never, which creates some really, really entertaining college basketball. But you have to give your props to Texas A&M. When the lights were brightest and they needed their guys the most, they stepped up.
Yeah, I mean, as a team, you talk about their shooting. They're like a 28% 3-point shooting team as a team. But in this game, they went 42%, shooting 11 for 26. Wade Taylor alone went 6 for 14, which is not usually his style of game, but he was chucking because they were falling. Obviously, missing 8 of them, who cares when you can make 6 of them there? That was still a really important part of this game. And we talked about, with Kentucky, ways they can be beat. When your defense is susceptible, and a team like this, you allow teams like Texas A&M to put up offensive performances that they're not used to doing. So Wade Taylor, I mean, he's been talked about, and he's a super solid guard. I think he is honestly highly underrated in terms
A
of what I
thousand
would say
percent.
nationally.
A
I
thousand
think we even
percent.
may have had some of this conversation last year. He's
We
just a guy
definitely
that doesn't
did.
receive he doesn't receive a lot of recognition, but he's a veteran who's been through a lot, and he is super solid. He put up
Yes.
32 in this one.
I mean, however, who pays attention to Texas A&M basketball nationally? And that's the caveat to
Especially when
that. But
as a team they haven't had a ton of success. So I
sure.
do get it, but we've seen teams like this where you're led by an experienced guard that has the ability to just pop off and have an insane game. They're susceptible to making runs. So I would not, if Texas A&M is able to find themselves, in this tournament, which it sure seems like they are going to be able to with this most recent win, do not sleep on this team.
I think the thing that I'm going to look out for Texas A&M in the tournament is, will they play with the same fire and intensity that they brought to the SEC tournament?
You have to
Because
keep that mentality.
watching that game, there was a certain hunger and drive about them, like they would not be denied. And
They
it
wanted it
caused
more
them
flat out.
it caused them to play their best basketball. They're in a situation where losing means your season's done, and Kentucky not really. They're in regardless.
They're in no
So
matter what.
when A&M gets into the tournament, can they keep that killer mentality that's necessary to make a deep run? I'm not sure, but stranger things have happened. But that's all we got for this SEC conference breakdown. If you want to watch our other college basketball content, we have most of the Power Six, including some mid-majors to get you ready for Selection Sunday and the tournament. We also have Purdue and Butler content if that's the sort of thing you want to watch. We got it all here. We are absolutely sprinting towards the tournament, and it is such a fun time here at Running the Table. We love every second, and we appreciate every single one of you that stands with us the whole way. So let us know what you want to talk about next, and until next time, we out. Pretty much. I lost my train of thought, so we're gonna cut this John off. Goofy, all right, let's do it.